The core chamber erupted into chaos. As soon as Doyun, Hana, and Seok made their move toward the central structure, the guardian organisms responded. Massive forms of living shadow lunged forward, only to meet a wall of gunfire from the 7 soldiers who stayed behind. Jisoo took position on a raised platform that gave her a clear view of the entire chamber. Her rifle cracked with precise rhythm, each shot finding weak points in the Guardian's armor. She couldn't kill them quickly, but she could slow them down, force them to regenerate by precious seconds. Minho had spent the last of his prepared explosives, but that didn't stop him. He scavenged components from his equipment, from the dead Guardians, even from the chamber's organic walls. Within minutes he was assembling new charges, cruder than his usual work but still deadly. "Grenade out," he shouted, tossing an improvised explosive into a cluster of Guardians. The blast scattered them, giving Bora time to set up her heavy weapon in a better position. Bora's weapon thundered continuously. She had abandoned controlled bursts and was simply pouring fire into the approaching enemies. Shell casings piled up around her feet and the barrel glowed red-hot. "Running low on ammunition. Down to maybe 300 rounds. Make them count," Yuna called back. The scout had disappeared into the shadows of the chamber, reappearing behind Guardians to strike at vulnerable spots before vanishing again. She couldn't do much damage with her lighter weapons, but she kept the enemies confused, never knowing where the next attack would come from. Yunji worked her medical station while firing her rifle one-handed. Quan sat beside her, injured but still capable of fighting. He had lost his mobility, but his aim was still good. Together they covered one approach, methodically dropping any Guardian that tried to flank the team. Hyun coordinated them all, calling out threats and movements. 3 incoming from the left. Jisoo, the big one at your 2 o'clock, is regenerating. Minho, I need something explosive in that choke point." The Guardians adapted quickly. Each wave was smarter than the last, learning from the failures of those who came before. They stopped clustering together to avoid explosives. They began using cover to avoid Jisoo's shots. They coordinated their attacks to come from multiple directions simultaneously. But humans adapted faster. When the Guardians spread out, Minho changed his explosive timing to catch them mid-movement. When they used cover, Jisoo adjusted her angles and started ricocheting shots off the chamber walls. When they coordinated their attacks, Hyun predicted the patterns and positioned the team to counter them. Meanwhile, across the chamber, Doyun led Hana and Seok toward the core. Guardian organisms tried to intercept them, but Doyun cut through them with brutal efficiency. His weapon never stopped firing, and when it ran empty, he drew his sidearm. When that ran dry, he used his combat knife. A Guardian caught him with a sweeping limb, sending him crashing into a wall. Before it could follow up, Seok was there with a chunk of salvaged equipment, smashing it into the creature's head. The Guardian reeled back, and Doyun was up again, driving his knife into its core. "Keep moving," Doyun ordered, blood running down his face from a gash above his eye. They reached the base of the core structure. Up close, it was even more alien and incomprehensible. Tendrils of neural tissue thick as human bodies pulsed with information. The air itself seemed alive with energy that made their instruments malfunction. Hana connected her equipment to the nearest interface point. Immediately, data flooded her systems, too much to process, overwhelming. She adjusted her filters, searching for the control protocols buried in the alien code. "This is incredible," she said, even as Guardians approached and Doyun moved to intercept them. "This structure has been operating for millions of years. It's consumed thousands of civilizations. All that knowledge, all that data stored here. Can you shut it down?" Seok asked while examining the physical structure for vulnerabilities. "I think so, but it's complicated. The control system has 3 primary nodes physically separated. They all have to be triggered simultaneously, or the system will just route around the damage and keep functioning." Seok studied the chamber. "I see them. 3 points forming a triangle around the core. We each take one position, trigger on Doyun's mark." "How long will you need?" Doyun asked, killing another Guardian. 2 minutes to set up each position. "Then we trigger together. You have 4 minutes, go." The 3 split up, each racing toward their assigned position. Behind them, the 7 soldiers fighting at the chamber's entrance were being pushed back. The Guardians had adapted too much, learned too much. They were overwhelming the human defenses through sheer numbers and coordination. "We can't hold much longer," Bora shouted, her weapon clicking empty. She dropped it and pulled her sidearm, continuing to fire. Jisoo's rifle was overheating. the barrel warped from continuous use. She switched to her backup weapon, but the Guardians were getting closer. One lunged at her position and she barely rolled aside in time. Its claws raked across her armor, tearing through the material. Minho was down to his last improvised explosive. He held it, waiting for the perfect moment. Guardians pressed in from three sides. He smiled. "If I'm going out, I'm taking you with me." "Not today." Yuna appeared from nowhere, her blades flashing. She had abandoned her weapons and was fighting with knives, darting between the massive Guardians like a dancer. She couldn't kill them, but she kept them off balance, gave Minho the seconds he needed to reposition. Yunji had exhausted her medical supplies. Quan was barely conscious beside her. Her ammunition was gone. She picked up a piece of broken equipment and held it like a club. "Come on then," she said to the approaching Guardians. "Let's see what you've got." At the core, Hana reached her position. The interface was pure alien technology, nothing like anything she had worked with before. But engineering was engineering. Programming was programming. She began the shutdown sequence, her fingers flying across her equipment. Siak reached his position and immediately saw a problem. The interface was damaged, possibly from earlier fighting. He pulled tools from his kit and began making repairs, working at impossible speed while Guardians closed in on his position. Doyen reached the third position and found it defended by the largest Guardian yet. The creature stood 4 meters tall, its body covered in thick armor plates, multiple limbs ending in weapons that crackled with energy. This was the core's final Guardian, the last line of defense. "Hana, Siak, how long?" Doyen called. 90 seconds. Hana replied, "I need 2 minutes." Siak shouted, "This interface is shot." Doyen looked at the massive Guardian. 90 seconds. He needed to hold for 90 seconds while his team completed the shutdown sequence. His weapons were nearly empty. His armor was damaged. He was bleeding from multiple wounds and radiation poisoning was making his hands shake. 90 seconds, he said to himself. "I can do 90 seconds, he charged the Guardian. The creature's limbs swept at him, but he was already moving, sliding beneath them. He fired his remaining rounds point blank into its core. The Guardian staggered but didn't fall. It caught him with a backhand that sent him flying. Doyen hit the ground hard but rolled to his feet. 70 seconds. He drew his knife and ran at the Guardian again. This time he climbed onto it, using its own armor plates as handholds. The creature thrashed, trying to shake him off, but he held on and drove his knife into what looked like a sensory cluster. The Guardian roared and spun, finally dislodging him. 50 seconds. Doyen crashed into a wall, definitely cracking ribs. He could barely breathe, but he got up. Always get up. That's what humans do. The Guardian advanced, and Doyen had nothing left. No weapons, no equipment, just his body and his will. He raised his fists. 30 seconds. At the entrance, the 7 soldiers made their last stand. They stood back to back in a circle, surrounded by Guardians. Ammunition gone, weapons broken, armor shredded. But none of them gave up. Jisoo fought with a broken rifle, using it as a club. Bora swung pieces of her dismantled weapon. Minho threw rocks. Yuna had 2 broken knives. Unji wielded her medical equipment as a weapon. Quan could barely stand but still struck at anything that came close. Hyun's drones were all destroyed, but he fought with bare hands. They were losing. Everyone knew it. But humans don't surrender. "Ready," Hana shouted from her position. "Interface active." "Ready," Siok called. "Repairs complete." "Ready," Doyen gasped, dodging another strike from the massive Guardian. 10 seconds on my mark, he ordered. The Guardian lunged at him. He didn't try to dodge. Instead, he ran forward, getting inside its reach. The creature's limbs closed around him, crushing, but he had what he needed. His hand reached his final piece of equipment. "A detonator, now!" Doyen triggered the detonator. Simultaneously, Hana and Seok activated their shutdown sequences. 3 actions, 1 moment, perfect synchronization. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The core structure began to collapse. Energy that had powered the void swarm for millions of years suddenly shut down. Throughout the chamber, throughout the entire structure, the Guardians froze. Then they began dissolving back into shadow. The massive Guardian holding Doyen released him as it died. He fell to the ground, gasping for air. Around the chamber, his team collapsed where they stood, exhausted beyond measure. But the structure was failing. The interior of the structure defied human understanding. Corridors stretched in impossible directions. Walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and gravity shifted without warning. One moment the team walked on what seemed like a floor. The next they were climbing what had been a wall. The air was thick and hostile, forcing them to rely on their suit systems. Doyen led the team forward in tactical formation. Jisoo covered their rear while Yuna scouted ahead, moving through the alien architecture like a ghost. Every few minutes she would reappear, signal clear, and they would advance another section deeper into the structure. Atmosphere analysis shows toxic compounds that would kill most galactic species instantly, Yoonji reported, checking her instruments. High radiation levels too. Even with suits, we shouldn't stay here long. How long do we have? Doyen asked. Maybe 12 hours before the radiation exposure becomes critical, less if we encounter anything worse. Hyun had deployed several small drones to map their route. The displays showed a maze of passages, some leading deeper, others looping back on themselves. This place is massive, kilometers across at least, maybe more. The structure doesn't follow any logical design pattern. It's organic, Seok said, running his hand along a wall that seemed to breathe. This isn't a building. It's alive. The whole structure is a living organism, or maybe part of one. Hana studied the patterns in the walls. These markings. They're not random. I think they're data storage. Biological computing. This entire structure is a database and control system combined. A tremor ran through the corridor. The walls contracted, forcing the team to move quickly before they were crushed. They emerged into a larger chamber, where the ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness above. Strange shapes moved in the shadows overhead, and the sound of something massive breathing echoed through the space. Contact, Jisoo said quietly, her rifle tracking movement in the darkness. Things descended from above. They were like the swarm organisms, but larger, more solid. Defense mechanisms awakened by the intrusion. They moved with terrible speed, their forms shifting between solid and shadow. Weapons free, Doyen ordered. The team opened fire. Chemical projectiles tore through the creatures, and this time the primitive weapons had effect. The organisms shrieked as explosions ripped through their bodies. They had adapted to energy weapons over millennia, but they had no defense against simple bullets and explosives. Minho tossed several grenades into the darkness above. The detonations brought down more creatures, their bodies dissolving into shadow as they died. But more kept coming, responding to the threat. Bora's heavy weapon roared, cutting down a wave of attackers. Spent shell casings clattered on the floor as she systematically eliminated targets. They're adapting. Second wave is more resistant. Seok had noticed the same thing. The organisms were already learning, their bodies changing to better resist the chemical weapons. We need to keep moving. The longer we stay in one place, the more they adapt. Yuna, find us a path, Doyun commanded while firing controlled bursts at the creatures. The scout disappeared into a side passage, reappearing 30 seconds later. This way. Narrow corridor. They can't swarm us. The team fought their way to the passage, with Jisoo providing cover fire as each member moved through. When everyone was inside, Minho collapsed the entrance behind them with precisely placed charges. The explosion sealed the passage, buying them time. They moved quickly through the narrower corridors. The structure seemed to be getting denser, the organic walls pressing closer. Hyun's drones were failing one by one, crushed by passages that contracted or destroyed by defense mechanisms. Lost the last drone, Hyun reported. We're mapping blind now. Yuna took point, using her instincts and training to find the way forward. Twice she led them away from passages that felt wrong, and both times they heard sounds of massive movements in the direction she had avoided. They entered a chamber where the walls were covered in what looked like nerve endings, all pulsing with synchronized light. Hana stopped, fascinated. This is a processing center. Information flows through here. If I can access it, I might be able to understand how the swarm is controlled. Do it fast, Doyen said, positioning the team in defensive positions around the chamber. We're exposed here. Hana connected her equipment to the organic structure. The interface was difficult, trying to communicate with an alien intelligence that thought in ways completely foreign to human or galactic understanding. But gradually patterns emerged. The swarm isn't evil, she said, data streaming across her displays. It's following ancient programming. This structure was created millions of years ago by a species we have no record of. They designed it to consume resources and expand. It was meant to be a tool, but the creators are long gone. The swarm just keeps following its last instructions. Can you shut it down? Doyen asked. Maybe, but I need to get deeper. to the core intelligence. This is just a processing node. A sound echoed through the chamber. Something massive was approaching. The walls began to vibrate and the temperature dropped rapidly. Yunji's instruments showed extreme readings. We have incoming. Something big. What entered the chamber was unlike anything they had faced before. A guardian organism, ancient and powerful, designed to protect the structure's vital systems. It towered 3 times human height, its body covered in armored plates that seemed to absorb light. Multiple limbs ended in razor-sharp appendages, and its presence radiated cold that their suits struggled to compensate for. The creature moved with terrifying speed. Bora's heavy weapon barely slowed it. Jisu's precise shots found weak points but didn't stop its advance. The team scattered as it swept through the chamber, its limbs cutting through the air where they had stood moments before. Quan took a risk, running directly at the creature and sliding beneath it. As he passed underneath, he attached several of Minho's explosives to its underside. "Now!" he shouted. Minho triggered the charges. The explosion lifted the creature off the ground, blowing massive holes in its armored body. But even wounded, it kept fighting. One limb caught Quan, throwing him across the chamber. He hit the wall hard and didn't get up. Yunji ran to him while the others kept the creature busy. "He's alive but hurt. Possible internal injuries. I need time to stabilize him." "Buy her time," Doyen ordered. The team concentrated their fire on the Guardian, using everything they had. Seok found structural weaknesses in the chamber and collapsed part of the ceiling onto the creature. Minho used his remaining explosives to blow off its limbs one by one. Finally, with a sound like tearing metal, the creature fell. Its body began dissolving, returning to the shadow it had been formed from. But the cost was clear. Quan was injured, their ammunition was running low, and they were deep in enemy territory with no easy way out. "Can you move him?" Doyen asked Yunji. She had given Quan something for the pain and stabilized his injuries as best she could. "He can walk with support. Won't be much use in a fight, though." Yuna and Bora helped Quan to his feet. The pilot grimaced but nodded that he could continue. "Sorry, should have been faster." "You were fast enough," Doyen said. "You're alive. Now let's finish this. Hana, how much further?" Hana checked her data. The interface with the organic structure had given her a map of sorts. 3 more chambers. The core is at the center of this structure, but the defenses will get worse the closer we get. Then we move fast and we move smart. Minimal engagement. We're not here to fight everything. We're here to complete the mission." The team pushed forward. They encountered more Guardians, but Yuna found ways around them. They navigated passages that tried to crush them, with Siak using his engineering knowledge to predict and counter the structure's movements. They crossed chambers where the atmosphere was pure poison, relying on their suits to keep them alive. Yunji worked constantly, treating minor injuries and monitoring everyone's condition. The radiation exposure was building, and several team members were showing early symptoms. They were running out of time. Finally, they reached the core chamber. It was vast, a spherical space at the structure's heart. In the center floated something that looked like a massive organic computer, tendrils of neural tissue connecting it to every part of the structure. This was the intelligence that controlled the Void Swarm, the mind behind the consumption of 17 civilizations. "There it is," Hana said, "the core." But between them and their target stood a final obstacle. The chamber was defended by dozens of guardian organisms, all larger and more advanced than anything they had faced before. And beyond them, the core itself pulsed with power that made their instruments scream warnings. Doyen studied the situation. 9 soldiers, 1 injured against impossible odds. Limited ammunition, failing equipment, and radiation poisoning setting in. By any logical assessment, they couldn't win this fight. But logic was just one way to solve problems. And humans had never been entirely logical. "Hana, Seok, you're with me. We're going for the core. Everyone else hold this position and keep those guardians busy. You don't have to kill them. Just keep them from stopping us." "How long do we hold?" Jisoo asked. "As long as it takes." The human transport ship docked at the orbital fortress exactly on schedule. The fortress was massive, easily the size of a small moon. It housed what remained of the Council's military forces and served as the last line of defense against the Void Swarm. Thousands of alien soldiers moved through its corridors, preparing for what many believed would be their final battle. Ambassador Velthera waited at the docking bay with General Threxon of the Titan Wing Dominion. The general's species stood 3 meters tall with armored skin that could deflect most weapons. He had commanded fleets for 200 years and lost more battles in the past month than in his entire previous career. He was not in a good mood. 10 soldiers, he muttered. Earth sends us 10 soldiers while my people sent 4 million and died. This is either brilliant or insulting. Velthara kept her crystalline face neutral. The ancient records suggest Deathworlders approach problems differently. Perhaps we should observe before judging. The airlock opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The first human stepped through and Velthara felt her entire body tense. She had met humans before during diplomatic functions, but seeing one in full combat gear was different. He was not particularly large by galactic standards, but something about the way he moved suggested coiled violence ready to explode. Captain Doyen surveyed the docking bay with calm, analytical eyes. He wore minimal armor compared to galactic standards, just tactical gear and equipment harnesses. His weapon looked primitive, a chemical projectile launcher that most species had abandoned thousands of years ago. But the way he carried himself spoke of absolute confidence. 9 more humans filed out behind him. Each one carried themselves with the same unsettling calm. They spread out naturally, taking positions that gave them clear views of all entrances without being told. Velthara noticed they were already assessing threats and escape routes. These were not parade soldiers. These were predators. Captain Doyen, Velthara said, stepping forward. Welcome to Fortress Salvation. I am Ambassador Velthara, and this is General Threxon. On behalf of the Galactic Council, we thank you for answering our call. Doyen nodded once. Ma'am, we're here to deal with the swarm. What's our current tactical situation? Threxon's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or frustration. Your tactical situation is hopeless. The swarm has consumed 17 civilizations. It destroyed the Council's combined fleets. Every weapon we possess is useless against it. There is no front line because the swarm is everywhere. We are preparing for our last stand, and frankly, I don't understand what 10 humans with primitive weapons think they can accomplish. One of the other humans stepped forward. She was smaller than Doyun, but had eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Lieutenant Hana carried multiple data devices and immediately began interfacing with the fortress's information network. General, she said, without looking up from her work, has anyone attempted to analyze the swarm's behavioral patterns? Identify command structures? Map its expansion vectors? Threxon stared at her. It's a mindless force of destruction. There's nothing to analyze. Hana finally looked up and her expression was cold. Everything can be analyzed. If it moves, it has patterns. If it attacks, it has priorities. If it expands, it has a purpose. You've been treating this like a natural disaster instead of an opponent. The general's armored plates bristled. I have fought wars for 2 centuries. I know how to identify an enemy. You know how to fight conventional enemies, Hana replied. This isn't conventional. That's why you lost. Velthara quickly stepped between them before the situation escalated. Perhaps we should introduce the rest of the team and provide them with all available intelligence data. Doyen nodded. Good idea. Lieutenant Hana is my second-in-command and tactical analyst. Let me introduce the others. He gestured to each team member in turn. Sergeant Minho, demolitions expert. Corporal Jisu, long-range specialist. Private Siak, combat engineer. Private Yunji, medical officer. Private Hyun, communications and drone operations. Private Bora, heavy weapons. Private Kwan, pilot. Private Yuna, reconnaissance and infiltration. Each soldier nodded as they were introduced but said nothing. They stood relaxed but ready, and Velthara noticed how they constantly monitored their surroundings. These humans never stopped assessing their environment. Threxon studied them with growing skepticism. No energy shields. Minimal armor. Chemical weapons. How do you expect to survive against the swarm? Minho, the demolitions expert, smiled. Shields fail. Armor slows you down. And sometimes old technology works better than new. That's insane, Threxon said. Maybe, Minho replied. But we're still alive and your 4 million ships aren't. The general's plates flared with anger, but Doyen raised a hand. Sergeant, stand down. General, we're not here to debate doctrine. We're here to complete a mission. We'll need complete access to all intelligence on the swarm. Every scan, every engagement report, every piece of data you have. Velthara activated her interface. Transferring everything now. But I must warn you, the data is overwhelming. Millions of reports from hundreds of engagements. Hana's equipment beeped as the transfer began. We'll manage. Hyun, help me sort through this. Seok, I want you to analyze their weapons data and why nothing worked. Everyone else, familiarize yourselves with the fortress layout and equipment available. The team dispersed immediately, each one moving to their assigned task without question. Velthara watched them work with growing fascination. They operated with a level of coordination she rarely saw outside of hive mind species. But these were individuals, each one thinking and acting independently while somehow maintaining perfect unity of purpose. Over the next several hours, the humans established themselves in a section of the fortress. They converted a conference room into an operations center, covering the walls with data displays and tactical maps. Other soldiers gave them a wide berth, unsettled by their intensity and focus. Jisoo, the sniper, found an observation deck with clear views of the surrounding space and spent 2 hours just watching. When a Titan Wing officer asked what she was doing, she replied simply, "Learning the terrain." Bora requisitioned heavy weapons from the fortress armory, examining each one carefully before selecting 3 that met her standards. The armory officer was shocked when she carried all 3 along with ammunition containers that would require a small vehicle for most species. Quan spent time in the hangar, studying the various ships and fighters available. He found a small stealth craft that most pilots avoided because it was difficult to handle. He took it out for a test flight and returned 30 minutes later, having pushed it to performance levels the designers thought impossible. Yuna simply disappeared. Security sensors lost track of her within an hour of arrival. She reappeared 6 hours later, having mapped every corridor, access shaft, and hidden space in their section of the fortress. When asked how she moved without being detected, she just smiled. In the operations center, Hana worked with Hyun sorting through the massive data dump. Screen after screen of information flowed past as they searched for patterns. Seok joined them after completing his analysis of Council weapons. "Their weapons are too advanced," Seok reported. "Everything is designed for precision and efficiency. The swarm doesn't care about either. It absorbs energy, adapts to frequencies, and disperses impacts. They need something crude and overwhelming." Hana nodded. "I'm seeing patterns in the attack data. The swarm isn't random. It's selective. It targets certain systems before others. There's an intelligence directing it." Doyen studied the map she had created. "Can you predict its next move?" "Maybe. Give me another 12 hours with this data." Yoonji appeared with food containers. Real food from Earth that the team had brought with them. "You all need to eat and rest. Can't fight on an empty stomach." The team gathered briefly, eating quickly and efficiently. They shared observations and updated their understanding of the situation. To an outside observer, it looked like a casual conversation. But Velthara, who had been watching from the doorway, recognized it as a tactical briefing disguised as a meal. When they finished, Doyun addressed his team. "We have 2 advantages. First, we're small and mobile. We can go places their fleets can't. Second, we think differently. The Council tried to overpower the swarm. We're going to outsmart it. What's the plan?" Mino asked. "Hana will identify the swarm's patterns and predict its behavior. Then we're going into swarm-controlled space to find out what it's protecting. Because Hana's right, everything protects something. We find its weakness." Threxen, who had been listening from outside, burst into the room. "That's suicide. No ship has survived in swarm space for more than a few hours." Doyen looked at him calmly. "Then we'll have to work fast." The stealth ship cut through space like a shadow. Quan sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls as he guided them deeper into territory that every other species had fled. Behind him, the rest of the team prepared their equipment and studied the data that Hana had compiled. 3 hours until we reached the first swarm concentration," Quan reported. His voice was calm, as if he was announcing a routine patrol rather than a suicide mission into the most dangerous region of known space. Hana stood at the tactical display, manipulating data streams with practiced efficiency. She had spent 14 hours analyzing the Council's intelligence, and what she found had changed everything. The swarm has a pattern. Most species missed it because they were too busy dying, but it's there. It always moves toward specific types of star systems first, systems with certain mineral compositions and energy signatures. Doyen moved to stand beside her. "It's feeding." "Exactly. And if it's feeding, it has a digestive system, a core where it processes everything it consumes. That's what we're looking for." Seok looked up from the engineering station where he was modifying their weapons. The Council's energy weapons passed right through the swarm, but our chemical explosives should work differently. The swarm adapts to energy frequencies, but it hasn't seen combustion-based weapons in thousands of years. It won't know how to counter them immediately. Minho grinned as he assembled his explosives. Sometimes primitive is better. Can't hack a hand grenade. The ship's sensors started picking up the edge of swarm space. What appeared on their screens made several team members pause. The darkness was not empty. It moved with purpose, flowing like liquid shadow through the void. Tendrils of black reached out across light years, and in their path, stars simply ceased to exist. Visual confirmation of swarm. Yuna reported from the sensor station. It's bigger than the data suggested. Much bigger. Yunji checked her medical supplies one more time. She had trained for every type of combat injury, but she had no idea what the swarm might do to human biology. Try not to let it touch you. I don't have protocols for treating shadow corruption. Jisoo had set up her rifle near one of the viewing ports. Even knowing her weapon was useless at these ranges, she felt better having it ready. How close are we getting? As close as we need to, Doyun replied. We're not here to fight. We're here to learn. The ship crossed into swarm space and immediately the sensors went haywire. The darkness seemed to notice them. Tendrils shifting direction to investigate the intrusion. Quan's fingers flew across the controls, adjusting their course to slip between the grasping shadows. They're curious, Hana observed. Not immediately aggressive. The swarm is trying to identify us. Hyun launched a dozen small drones, each one programmed to collect different types of data. They scattered into the darkness, their cameras and sensors recording everything. Most were consumed within minutes, but the data they sent back was invaluable. Got it, Hyun said, his screens filling with information. Microscopic structure detected. The swarm isn't a single entity. It's billions of tiny organisms working together, like a swarm of insects but at a cosmic scale. Siak examined the data. Each organism individually is fragile, but together they form something nearly invincible. Smart. That's why energy weapons don't work. You can destroy a few million organisms, but there are trillions more to take their place. So how do we kill trillions of organisms? Bora asked, checking her heavy weapons ammunition count. We don't, Hana said. We find what controls them. Look at this. She pulled up one of the drone's final transmissions. Deep within the swarm there was a structure, something solid in all that darkness. There. That's what we're looking for. A massive tendril of shadow swept toward their ship. Quan threw the vessel into a diving turn that would have broken most species' bones. The humans just braced themselves and held on. The tendril missed by meters. They're getting aggressive, Quan reported. I can dodge for a while, but eventually something's going to hit us. Minho moved to the ship's small cargo airlock. Time for a distraction. Hyun, when I dump these explosives, trigger them in sequence. Make it look like we're attacking. Are we attacking? Yuna asked. No, we're running. But I want them chasing the explosions, not us. Doyun nodded. Do it. Minho released a series of explosive charges into space. Hyun waited until the swarm tendrils surrounded them, then triggered the detonations. Fire bloomed in the darkness, not harming the swarm significantly, but definitely getting its attention. While the swarm focused on the explosions, Quan accelerated the ship deeper into enemy territory. They passed the ruins of what had once been a civilization, dead worlds stripped of all resources, space stations that were now just skeletal remains. The swarm had consumed everything, leaving nothing but empty husks drifting in the void. 17 civilizations, Yunji said quietly. How many people lived on these worlds? Billions, Hana replied. Gone in weeks, the swarm doesn't kill out of malice, it just consumes. Like a wildfire or a flood. Natural disaster on a galactic scale. Jisoo kept her eyes on the sensors. Movement pattern change. The swarm is forming a barrier ahead of us. It's trying to prevent us from reaching that structure. It's protecting something, Doyun said. Good. That means we're going the right way. Quan, can you get us through? The pilot studied the wall of darkness forming ahead of them. Maybe, but it'll be close. Then make it close. The ship accelerated to maximum speed. The swarm closed in from all sides, forming a sphere of living shadow around them. Quan wove through the gaps, his reaction superhuman as he anticipated the swarm's movements. Twice they came so close to the darkness that it scraped along the ship's hull, leaving scorch marks on the armor. Then they were through, breaking into a pocket of clear space at the swarm's center. And there, floating in the void, was their target. A structure so massive it dwarfed planets, organic architecture that pulsed with alien life. It was beautiful and terrible, ancient beyond measure. That's the heart, Hana breathed. The swarm's control center. The structure was heavily defended. Layers of swarm organisms surrounded it, forming a protective barrier. But Sayok was already analyzing the defenses. Their protection is focused outward. They're expecting attacks from outside, not infiltration. Doyen made his decision. We're going inside. The team stared at him. Even for humans who regularly attempted impossible tasks, this seemed beyond reach. But Doyen's expression was calm and certain. The council tried to fight the swarm from outside, tried to overpower it with numbers and firepower. It didn't work because they were fighting on the swarm's terms. We're going to change the terms. We get inside that structure, find its control systems, and shut it down. And if we can't shut it down, Yuna asked, then we blow it up. Minho, how much explosive did you bring? Minho grinned. Enough to crack a moon if needed. Quan brought the ship closer to the structure, using every stealth system they had to avoid detection. The swarm organisms flowed around them, unaware that their enemy was already inside their defenses. They found what looked like an entrance, a dark opening in the structure's surface that seemed to breathe. That's not ominous at all, Bora muttered. Doyen checked his weapon one final time. Equipment check, we go in full gear. Stay together, watch your sectors, and remember your training. This is just another mission. But as they prepared to enter, the structure that controlled a force capable of destroying civilizations, every member of the team knew this was not just another mission. This was something unprecedented, something that would either save the galaxy or end with 10 humans dying in the darkness. The airlock cycled open. The team moved forward into the structure, weapons ready. Behind them, their ship sealed and waited, its stealth systems hiding it from the swarm. Ahead of them lay corridors of living tissue and alien technology older than human civilization. And somewhere deep inside, the heart of the void swarm waited. The emergency alarms echoed through the massive orbital station that floated at the center of the galaxy. Inside the grand chamber, representatives from 1,000 different species sat in their designated seats. Some had scales, others had fur, and many had forms that defied easy description. They had gathered here for 3,000 years to maintain peace across the stars. Today they were facing the end of everything they had built. Ambassador Velthara stood at the center podium. Her blue crystalline body reflected the harsh emergency lights as she spoke. Her voice carried to every corner through translation devices that converted her words into 1,000 languages simultaneously. The news she brought was worse than anyone had imagined. 17 civilizations are gone, she said. The chamber fell silent. The void swarm has consumed them completely. No survivors, no distress calls, just empty space where their worlds once existed. A representative from the Titan-winged Dominion stood up. His massive frame towered over most others in the room. We sent our entire military fleet to stop it. 4 million warships with the best weapons in the galaxy. They all failed. Most of them never came back. Another voice called out from across the chamber. We tried psychic attacks. Our most powerful minds linked together to strike at the swarm. It did nothing. The darkness just kept coming. Velthara nodded grimly. Every weapon we have tried has failed. Energy weapons pass through it like it's not there. Physical projectiles are absorbed. Nuclear explosions only seem to feed it. Dimensional weapons made it stronger. We are running out of options and running out of time. An old historian from the archive world stepped forward. He carried ancient data crystals in his mechanical arms. I have been searching our oldest records. 50,000 years ago, there was another void swarm incident. Most of the records are damaged, but I found fragments. The species that stopped it no longer exist, but they left behind one important detail. They called them Deathworlders. The term caused confusion throughout the chamber. Most species came from gentle worlds with stable climates and abundant resources. They had evolved in safety and comfort. The concept of a death world was foreign to them. A death world, the historian explained, is a planet so hostile that simply surviving there requires constant adaptation, extreme temperatures, dangerous predators, deadly diseases, natural disasters. Species from such worlds develop traits that others do not possess: endurance, aggression, the ability to thrive in chaos. Velthara's crystalline face showed something like hope. Are there any Deathworlders in the council? The chamber grew quiet as representatives looked at each other. Most worlds in the galaxy were paradise compared to what the historian described. Finally, one voice spoke up from the back of the room. Earth. The word caused immediate reaction. Some representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others made sounds of disapproval. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council only 47 years ago, and they had a reputation. They were violent, unpredictable. They consumed chemicals for pleasure and engaged in recreational combat. Their entertainment consisted of simulated warfare and stories about disasters. Other species found them deeply unsettling. Earth is classified as a severe death world, the historian confirmed. Gravity higher than galactic average, extreme weather patterns, tectonic instability, aggressive predators, disease organisms that constantly evolve. And yet humans not only survived there, they became the dominant species. The Titan Wing general who had lost his fleet stood up again. I don't care where they come from. We need results. If these humans can help, we should ask them immediately. The vote was quick. When facing extinction, old prejudices mattered less. The council authorized an emergency request to Earth. They needed help, and they needed it now. The message reached Earth's military command center 3 days later. Keiko. Commanders gathered to review the information the council had sent. Images of the void swarm appeared on their screens. Living darkness that consumed stars. Tentacles of shadow that reached across space. A horror that had defeated the combined might of 1,000 civilizations. General Park studied the data carefully. She had spent 30 years in Earth's military and had seen many threats. This was something different, something unprecedented. She turned to her staff. Analysis? A young intelligence officer spoke up. The swarm appears to be organic in nature, but operates on a scale we've never encountered. It shows coordinated behavior across light years of space. The Council's weapons didn't work because they're designed for conventional warfare. This is something else. Can we stop it? General Park asked. The officer hesitated. Unknown. But the Council is desperate. They've lost 17 member species and multiple fleets. If we don't help, the swarm will eventually reach Earth. General Park nodded slowly. She understood the bigger picture. Earth might be far from the current threat, but the void swarm was expanding. Eventually, it would arrive in human space. Better to face it now on terms they could choose than wait for it to come to them. We'll send a team, she decided. Her second-in-command looked surprised. A team? The Council sent millions of ships. Shouldn't we send our fleet? General Park smiled. It was not a warm smile. The Council thinks in terms of massive force. They throw numbers at problems. That's why they failed. We're going to send specialists. People who can think, adapt, and find solutions that others miss. How many? Someone asked. 10. The room erupted in discussion. 10 soldiers against a threat that had destroyed civilizations seemed absurd. But General Park raised her hand for silence. The Council asked for Deathworlders. They want to see what humans can do. We'll show them. Select our best special operations team. People with real combat experience. People who have survived impossible situations. We're not sending them to fight the swarm head-on. We're sending them to find its weakness and exploit it. The order went out that same day. 10 soldiers were selected from Earth's most elite units. They were given 72 hours to prepare, and then transported to the Council's staging area. When the Galactic Council received Earth's response, they were stunned. Only 10 soldiers? Some representatives called it an insult. Others thought humanity didn't understand the scale of the threat. A few wondered if Earth was simply abandoning them to their fate. But the message from General Park was clear and simple. You asked for Death Worlders. We're sending our best. They'll get the job done. Velthara read the message again and felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks. Not quite hope, but something close to it. Maybe these humans knew something the rest of the galaxy didn't. Maybe their perspective from a death world would give them an edge. Or maybe they would die like everyone else who had faced the swarm. In 3 days, she would find out. The humans were coming.